which unfortunately at this late date has to be circumstantial. Either the army did not know where my father was, or it doesn't see the point in telling his descendants where he was. Why spoil their illusions? Maybe they might be that magnanimous at this late date. What I have is my father in Van der Vogel and Hitler's between the ages of 10 and 13. My brother and I do agree that I don't know if my brother would agree that my father was sympathetic to Nazi politics, although I think he would have a job to deny it. But he was in sympathy with his German boyhood friends, which is hardly surprising. You couldn't blame him for that. He did wonder what had happened to his German boyhood friends. Who wouldn't? I can even feel some sympathy when I think of him at the beginning of World War II, being told we are now at war with Germany. Hell, he was fluent in German. He kept notes from German families, which I think have flashed up at times in videos. So I have him with affection for German people whom he knew, indoctrination in Nazi politics. Physically, his movements in the war are more or less accounted for if you don't include the elsewhere given by the army, which is just a little bit obscure. Physically, this does not mean that he was not a fifth columnist, and I still very much believe that he was. And in fact, while in France, supposedly fleeing the Germans, what if you bumped into some of them? What's his instant response going to be? He'd start talking in German. Might they have given him a choice? I gather this happened to people who were caught by the Germans in France. You can be shot, or you can join us in the British SS. This is what I believe happened. Now, again, it is circumstantial, but then we have the end of the war. I don't think he had any business following my mother to Malaya or Singapore. Personally, that's my opinion. And there's nothing there in the records to say. The war was over. My brother does have a version of these events, but they don't tally with the fact that the war was over. My parents had stories about, my father had stories about how his and my mother's postings were coincidental, and I didn't believe it when I was a child. I didn't believe it because of the looks my mother gave him when he said it. I knew that wasn't true. I believe, and I did say in my book, that he followed her. For what reasons? I can only guess. Okay, so now he's in Malaya and Singapore, where a friend of mine told me he couldn't possibly be in World War II, and he was correct. He said, they were occupied by the Japanese. Your father and mother could not have been there. Not in the war. Post-war, yes, they could. And they were. But on the 12th of the 12th, 45, as I have said, in a long way ago video, my father wrote a letter changing his name from Desmond to Dick. Dick capitalized and underlined twice. This is serious. I won't stand for the other abomination, Desmond. Dick is my name till the day I meet the devil. That's the gist. I have flashed the letter up. Dick till the day I meet the devil. This is serious. He then changed his address for newsletters from the Madras Sappers and Miners. From his wife's address to his mother's address. His wife's was crossed out. If only I'd known it, because I'd seen that pamphlet a long, long time ago. I had his wife's address a long, long time ago, in childhood. 88 6th Cross Road, cross through. And his mother's address substituted. He then failed to go back to his pregnant wife. Instead, he was God knows where, between January 1946 and July 1946. But I believe that to have been in Ceylon with my mother, because they were in Ceylon at some point, and there is no other place in their timetable in World War II that it could have been. It has to have been in those months. So I think he was taking cover in Ceylon for those months. On arrival back in England, there is, as I've said, a weird photograph in Piccadilly in supposedly July 46, but I can't, of course, be sure of that. The 11th of July, if I believe my father. July, if I believe my mother. She's more likely to tell the truth. And his daughter Karen, born on the 22nd of July. In London. And actually it wasn't many miles away. Piccadilly is not very far from 88 6th Cross Road. It's a handful of miles, not many. Perhaps a little more than a handful. Then they turn up in Coventry on, I think, the 2nd of September, 46. It was certainly very early in September. My father signed up with the British Legion in Coventry, giving his address as 2 Sandy Lane, Coventry. That struck me as odd, because my mother's library card gave her address as 17 Binley Road, Coventry. And now we have a friend turning up who appears to have lived at more or less the same address. Anyway, my father's sole character witness turned up after he was dead. Sorry, Michael. Again. What I have is, at the end of World War II, my father, who was an indoctrinated Nazi, certainly by politics, sympathetic to the Germans because he knew a lot of them, fleeing, changing his name, leaving his wife, leaving his home, and taking up with a woman whom no one had ever heard of, presumably, at least not in England. In other words, making himself fairly difficult to trace.